me on the podcast, I have Harriet Minter. She's a journalist, broadcaster and speaker, specialising in women's leadership and empowerment, and was formerly the Guardian Women in Leadership editor. She currently presents the Badass Women's Hour on talk radio with Emma Sexton and Natalie Campbell, and writes a column for Psychologies magazine. Welcome, Harriet.
Hello, thank you for having me.
So, Harriet, you're known for founding the Guardian Women in Leadership section, which was extremely popular. How did that come about?
So I was working at The Guardian, and my remit was basically to create new sections on the website. So to kind of come up with a topic, think about what the audience for that topic was, and basically try and grow the website readership. And I've been doing that for a little while, and I'd sort of run out of things to launch. I noticed that all around me, everyone was talking about women in work. So there was this big government report into the number of women on boards. I used to get on the tube and people would be reading Lean In. There just seemed to be lots of chat about it, but nobody was really kind of taking it seriously. And I also knew that when it came to women's media, the way we cater for women in the media is that we write about their relationships and their appearance. But when I go out for dinner with my girlfriends, we would talk about our jobs. So I thought there was a missed opportunity, and I went to my boss, and he wasn't that convinced, to be honest. He wasn't that sure. And then I sort of chatted to lots of people about it, and eventually I got talking to a woman who worked in our events team, and she was like, oh my God, I've always wanted to run an event on this, but every time I suggest it, it just gets knocked back. Why don't we team up and run an event together? And then if it's a success, we'll have some proof that there's a market for it. And if it's not, we'll just sort of deny that we ever did it. So we did, and we sold the event out. We had 120 people, and my boss came to it, and he was the only man in the room. And afterwards, I sort of said to him, oh, what did you think? Did you enjoy it? And he was like, I really did enjoy it. I really did. But it was quite strange because I wanted to ask a question, but as the only man in the room, I felt like I couldn't. Is that what it's like to be a woman? And within that minute, he had the experience that I think pretty much every woman has had of at some point being the only person of your kind, in this case gender, only woman in the room. And it is really weird when that's the case. You do speak less, you do ask fewer questions, you do hesitate before speaking up, you do get spoken over. And that's, I think, a common experience for women, but it wasn't a common experience for men. He'd never had it. And it took him kind of experiencing that to say, okay, there's something here, this could be interesting. And when he had that experience, then we got it up and running, and it was launched, I think, about 6 weeks later.
It's interesting when people experience things for themselves.
Absolutely. I mean, I find that that was really like a really big lesson for me, which is you can't tell people stuff. You have to make them feel it.
I know today, Harriet, you're doing coaching, you're a consultant, a journalist, a radio show host and a TEDx speaker. Which one of those things do you enjoy the most? And how do you balance your time with that portfolio of activities?
Oh, great question. So the thing I enjoy the most, absolutely, definitely, is public speaking. I love it. I am a frustrated actress at heart. If I won the lottery tomorrow, I would quit all work and I would just go to drama school, and I'd spend my life trying and probably failing to be an actress. So I think being up on stage, having an audience, and then really and this sounds very manipulative and awful, but the joy of public speaking is being able to control and move that audience's emotions and feelings. And then for you as a public speaker, be able to adapt to what's happening with that audience and say, okay, well, this is the direction they're in now, so they want more of this or less of that. So that I find lovely. That's it combines a kind of air of performance with a bit of danger. So I really enjoy that. And then the rest of it, I'm really lucky. Everything gives me something different. I would say that I'm definitely a generalist rather than a specialist. So if I do anything for too long, I get a bit bored. On kind of balancing time, I think it is, I basically just know when, it sounds mercenary, but when I start to see the money decrease in a certain area, I haven't spent enough time in that area. And also sometimes you get to a point where you feel a bit like, oh, I'm a bit done with this, I'm unexcited by it. And then something comes along which really invigorates it again for you. So I had a moment a few months ago where I was sort of, oh God, I don't have very many coaching clients, and the ones I've got, love them dearly, but I've had them for a long time. So there's no big dramas for them. They're kind of, they're set on the way, they know what they're doing. And then out of the blue, I got kind of 2 new clients who I really loved and thought were so fascinating and interesting. So I think I'm quite lucky that it balances itself, but I think that's also because I keep a little bit of an eye on where's the money and how am I feeling about each of those sections.
And picking up on that idea about how you feel about things, Harriet, my sense is that you like a little bit of danger or daring or risk in what you do.
Yeah, I do. I love a bit of risk. There's a reason that I don't go to casinos, right? Because I would lose all my money. I like there to be... It's not even so much that I like a bit of risk, it's that it energizes me. And when everything is very set and stable, then I feel like there's not enough energy around it. I wish I could be somebody that was just naturally motivated, but I'm not. I need there to be a little bit of fear to boost the motivation.
So thinking about some of our listeners who may be in a job that is fairly stable and certain, and they want a little bit of risk or excitement or something different in their lives, what would you say to them to encourage them to metaphorically step out their comfort zone?
Great. I would say, I guess kind of the example I gave a second ago, like if you won the lottery tomorrow, what would you do? And then look at where that is leading you a little bit. So if you're saying, well, if I ran the lottery tomorrow, I would quit my job and buy a yacht in the Bahamas. Great. Maybe don't do that. But you could think, okay, well, actually, if what I really want is to spend more time sailing, then how can you bring that into your life a little bit? Can you set yourself up for a challenge? Is there something you can go and work on, a side project you can go and work on that allows you to do that? You look at kind of what's the stuff that if money and time are no objects, where would your heart and soul go? And play out in that area. And then the other thing I would say is keep it small. So you can have a really big dream, and that's great, but they get quite scary quite quickly. So have the big dream and then say, what's one small thing that I could do towards this? So if you, I don't know why I'm on a sailing narrative, but clearly I am. If you want to go and sail around the world, like a small step to that is go join a sailing club. That's what I would say. It's when the idea feels really, really big that I think it's then easiest for us to get stuck in inaction, because it feels like we can't possibly make an idea that big happen.
So it sounds like sensible advice there, to take small steps and iterative steps.
Yeah, and also do small and iterative, but also with a little bit of fear. So somebody described it to me as, when we think about comfort zone, there's the centre of the comfort zone, which is completely safe. You totally know what you're doing. It's just very calm, still waters. Then there's the kind of edge of the comfort zone where you're still in your comfort zone, but it feels like any second now you could be out of it. There's a little bit of risk involved. And then there's the land of fear and terror. And we don't want to end up in the land of fear and terror, but we definitely want to be on the edge of the comfort zone.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And I suppose with helping people to be inspired to take those steps, and this podcast is all about helping people access inspiration, I'm curious to know what inspires you, Harriet.
What inspires me? Having said that I'm a journalist, I'm always really inspired by people who have serious depth and knowledge and passion for their subject. So when you see somebody and they're really passionate about what they do and that's making then a difference to their lives and to other people's lives, I find that hugely inspiring. I think for me, inspiration is more of a feeling than an act. And I really can feel it. Like I can feel it like fizzing all the way up from my toes, all the way up and through my body. And I get that when people are doing stuff that I would love to do, but I feel like I'm not good enough, or I'm too scared, or I'm not going to be able to make it work. And then somebody comes along and you're like, oh, well, they're doing it. And they're just a human being. We're all just human beings. None of us have special, amazing talents. Like, we're just humans making our way through the world. So if they're doing it, then does that mean I could do it too?
So it relates to me, from what I'm hearing there, back to your spheres of comfort zone, that if something seems too difficult and unachievable, it's in that fear and terror zone.
Yeah.
But when you can relate to the person and see that you could be that person, it seems to then have an attractive to draw you towards it.
And also I feel like it's not, when something's too ephemeral, when somebody like, I've spoken to people who are amazing. They're like, I want to change 1 billion women's lives. And I'm like, well, that's incredible, but where do you even start with that? And how are you even going to know that you've changed 1 billion women's lives? And yet, then I see them and they might be running a coaching program which teaches women to become coaches, to teach other women to become coaches, and so on and so forth. And so they've worked out how they're going to do it. And then I'm like, oh, okay, I see. Right, that I can get excited about. And so for me, there's something about, I'm sometimes not great at taking the kind of big idea into the visual action steps. But when I can see what that looks like, then I get really excited.
And one might imagine that your ability to coach and help others to do that is how you might add value to their lives?
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I think just the law of life is that everything is easier in other people's lives. Like, other people's problems are always much, much easier than your own. And this for me is why I think having a coach is really kind of life-changing if you can access one, because suddenly the stuff that you think is impossible to solve will to them be quite straightforward. And that's not because, they're geniuses. It's simply because other people's problems are easier than our own. And we are so stuck in the story of our own problems and what they mean and how difficult they are and how it's never going to change, that we can't see the wood for the trees, or maybe the trees for the wood in that example. But having somebody outside of it allows us to do that. And so for me, being able to do that for other people is a joy. It's how lovely to be able to sit there with someone and be like, okay, well, you think you've got this thing that can never change, but actually, could we do this one little thing that might change it? Let's give it a go.
They always say the journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step.
Yeah, exactly.
So a thought about women's leadership today, Harriet. You're clearly in the middle of understanding what the hot topics are in that space. What do you see are the things that are being talked about and important for women's leadership today?
So I think there's definitely a move away from just thinking of it as women's leadership and thinking of it as intersectional leadership. So when we talk about intersectionality, we're talking about my experience as a middle-class white woman is different from somebody else's experience as a working-class white woman, or as a middle-class black woman, or as a middle-class white woman with a disability. It's actually looking at women and men are not two homogenous groups. We all have different experiences and understanding of the world, and how do they play into our leadership. So I think that's really key. I think there's a really interesting discussion around kind of women leaving the workplace, because we just have not cracked that. So while the numbers of women getting into leadership roles might be slightly bigger than it was before, actually the numbers of women available to go into those roles hasn't grown. And that's a big problem, right? So why do women leave? And it's unfortunate that it happens around the same time that women have babies, but it's actually not really driven by the babies. It's driven by life expectations, desires. I have a belief that it's driven by the fact that it's kind of socially acceptable for women to say, I'm leaving the big corporate world and I'm going to do my own thing, or I'm going to stay at home for a bit, or I'm going to go and retrain, in a way that it's not socially acceptable for men to do that. And it's driven by the fact that our workplace doesn't really work and support women and families in a way that makes it sustainable. So I think that's stuff that is still up for discussion. And then the other thing that I see being talked about lots, which I think is really interesting, is women's health. And so actually how we talk about things like menopause at work, how we talk about things like gynecological issues at work, how we understand that women's bodies biologically have different stages. For me, there was a really interesting thing a few years ago around kind of ageism in the workplace, and how I think the cutoff for men is 50. After 50, you become very aware of ageism in the workplace, but for women, it's 45. And to be honest, I would argue that it's much, much earlier. I remember kind of looking around my workplace and only seeing one woman who was over the age of 40. And I think a lot of that has to do with how we treat women pre and post menopause. And actually, when we open up that discussion and be like, it's not this kind of scary thing where women have to disappear off into a hut and stay there and never come out again, then I think we have a better understanding of life stages and what people at different life stages bring to the workplace.
It seems to be a theme from what you're saying here, Harriet, is about understanding difference and not making assumptions that we're all the same.
Yeah, definitely. That what I think the kind of women's leadership movement has done is it has allowed us to have a discussion about individuality. And I think when we look at the kind of female leadership movement, people can get quite eye-rolly about it and be like, oh, it's just for, certain types of women, or it's just women taking jobs even though they're not as qualified as men, and rah, rah, rah. And actually it's like, no, because of this, you get to say, as a man, actually, I want to stay at home with my kids. That happened because women started talking about why it was they weren't being given the top jobs. As a black woman, you get to say, hang on, I get paid less than all of my white colleagues. It started a conversation, and that conversation has a lot further to go But it wouldn't have happened if a load of women hadn't stood up and said, hang on, I'm really annoyed that I am as good, if not better, than my male colleagues, and I'm not getting the jobs they are.
So there's a domino effect to starting the conversation. So finally, Harriet, what top tips would you have for anyone listening that wants to take a step into the unknown, either in their career or in their life?
I would say the fact that you're even thinking that you want to do that is a sign that you should. You know, if the hunger is there, follow the hunger. I think it is about spend some time really looking at why you feel you can't. So what is the stuff that you have now that is currently feels too scary to give up? So when I left my job as a full-time journalist at The Guardian, it took me a year to do that. It took me a year to say, okay, I'm done here, I can go. And that was because it gave me stuff, you know, it gave me prestige, it gave me a salary, it gave me a great job title to talk about at dinner parties, all this kind of stuff. And it was kind of acknowledging what it gave me and being like, okay, well, how can I find that elsewhere? So really if you have a hunger to go, it doesn't mean that everything about your current role is bad. You know, it is still giving you things. You just need to acknowledge those and think about how else you're going to have those needs fulfilled. And then I would say, think about what's possible if you did this. If you took a step into the unknown, what could be possible? And don't limit that thinking. Don't say, okay, well, it won't happen for me, or it wouldn't work like that, or I couldn't do it, or it would be different, or just, if anything was possible, what could be possible?
So thank you, Harriet. It seems that the practical advice is about small steps. Keep taking small steps towards your big dreams.
Yes, definitely.
Harriet Minter, thanks for your time today. It's been great to talk to you.
Thank you.